Linguistics, morphology (MRFLD) is the study of words, how they are formed, and their relationship to other words in the same language. It analyzes the structure of words and parts of words such as stems, root words, prefixes, and suffixes. Morphology also looks at parts of speech, intonation and stress, and the ways context can change a word's pronunciation and meaning. Morphology differs from morphological typology, which is the classification of languages based on their use of words, and lexicology, which is the study of words and how they make up a language's vocabulary. While words, along with clitics, are generally accepted as being the smallest units of syntax, in most languages, if not all, many words can be related to other words by rules that collectively describe the grammar for that language. For example, English speakers recognize that the words dog and dogs are closely related, differentiated only by the plurality morpheme, s, only found bound to noun phrases. Speakers of English, a fusional language, recognize these relations from their innate knowledge of English's rules of word formation. They infer intuitively that dog is to dogs as cat is to cats, and, in similar fashion, dog is to dog catcher as dish is to dishwasher. By contrast, classical Chinese has very little morphology, using almost exclusively unbound morphemes, free morphemes, and it relies on word order to convey meaning. Most words in modern Standard Chinese Mandarin, however, are compounds and most roots are bound. These are understood as grammars that represent the morphology of the language. The rules understood by a speaker reflect specific patterns or regularities in the way words are formed from smaller units in the language they are using, and how those smaller units interact in speech. In this way, morphology is the branch of linguistics that studies patterns of word formation within and across languages and attempts to formulate rules that model the knowledge of the speakers of those languages. Phonological and orthographic modifications between a base word and its origin may be partial to literacy skills. Studies have indicated that the presence of modification in phonology and orthography makes morphologically complex words harder to understand and that the absence of modification between a base word and its origin makes morphologically complex words easier to understand. Morphologically complex words are easier to comprehend when they include a base word. Polysynthetic languages, such as Chukchi, have words composed of many morphemes. For example, the Chukchi word, Tmlevdp gamma T-arkan, meaning, I have a fierce headache, is composed of 8 morphemes T, me, levat P gamma T, arkan that may be glossed. The morphology of such languages allows for each consonant and vowel to be understood as morphemes, while the grammar of the language indicates the usage and understanding of each morpheme. The discipline that deals specifically with the sound changes occurring within morphemes is morphophonology. The history of morphological analysis dates back to the ancient Indian linguist Panini, who formulated the 3,959 rules of Sanskrit morphology in the text Astadhyayi by using a constituency grammar. The Greco-Roman grammatical tradition also engaged in morphological analysis. Studies in Arabic morphology, conducted by Mara al-Arwa and Ahmad B. Ali Masud, date back to at least 1200 CE. The linguistic term, morphology, was coined by August Schleicher in 1859. Lexemes and word forms. The term, word, has no well-defined meaning. Instead, two related terms are used in morphology, lexeme and word form. Generally, a lexeme is a set of inflected word forms that is often represented with the citation form in small capitals. For instance, the lexeme eat contains the word forms eat, eats, eaten, and ate. Eat and eats are thus considered different word forms belonging to the same lexeme eat. Eat and eater, on the other hand, are different lexemes, as they refer to two different concepts. Prosodic word versus morphological word. Here are examples from other languages of the failure of a single phonological word to coincide with a single morphological word form. In Latin, one way to express the concept of noun phrase 1 and noun phrase 2 feet, as in apples and oranges, is to suffix k to the second noun phrase, apples oranges n. An extreme level of the theoretical quandary posed by some phonological words is provided by the Kwaikouala language. In Kwaikouala, as in a great many other languages, meaning relations between nouns, including possession and semantic case, are formulated by affixes instead of by independent words. The three-word English phrase, with his club, in which, with, identifies its dependent noun phrase as an instrument and his, denotes a possession relation, would consist of two words or even one word in many languages. Unlike most other languages, Quechua semantic affixes phonologically attach not to the lexeme they pertain to semantically but to the preceding lexeme. Consider the following. Example: in Quechua, sentences begin with what corresponds to an English verb. There are three principal approaches to morphology and each tries to capture the distinctions above in different ways. Morpheme-based morphology, which makes use of an item and arrangement approach. Lexeme-based morphology, which normally makes use of an item and process approach. Word-based morphology, which normally makes use of a word and paradigm approach. While the associations indicated between the concepts in each item in that list are very strong, they are not absolute. In the 19th century, philologists devised a now classic classification of languages according to their morphology. Some languages are isolating, and have little to no morphology, others are agglutinative whose words tend to have many easily separable morphemes, others yet are inflectional or fusional because their inflectional morphemes are fused together. That leads to one bound morpheme conveying multiple pieces of information. A standard example of an isolating language is Chinese. An agglutinative language is Turkish. Latin and Greek are prototypical inflectional or fusional languages. It is clear that this classification is not at all clear-cut, and many languages, Latin and Greek among them, do not neatly fit any one of these types, and some fit in more than one way. A continuum of complex morphology of language may be adopted. The three models of morphology stem from attempts to analyze languages that more or less match different categories in this typology. The item and arrangement approach fits very naturally with agglutinative languages. The item and process and word and paradigm approaches usually address fusional languages. As there is very little fusion involved in word formation, classical typology mostly applies to inflectional morphology. Depending on the preferred way of expressing non-inflectional notions, languages may be classified as synthetic using word formation or analytic using syntactic phrases. Pingalapes is a Micronesian language spoken on the Pingalap Atoll and on two of the eastern Caroline Islands, called the High Island of Pohnpei. Similar to other languages, words in Pingalapes can take different forms to add to or even change its meaning. Verbal suffixes are morphemes added at the end of a word to change its form. Prefixes are those that are added at the front. For example, the Pingalapes suffix can means, with, or, at. It is added at the end of a verb. Use equals to use right pointing arrow use kin equals to use with. Mawahu equals Tobagood right pointing arrow Mawahu kin equals Tobagood at. Sa is an example of a verbal prefix. It is added to the beginning of a word and means, not. Puang equals to be correct right pointing arrow Sa Puang equals to be incorrect. There are also directional suffixes that when added to the root word give the listener a better idea of where the subject is headed. The verb alu means to walk. A directional suffix can be used to give more detail. Da equals, up, right pointing arrow ala da equals to walk up. D equals, down, right pointing arrow ala D equals to walk down. Eng equals, away from speaker and listener, right pointing arrow ala eng equals to walk away. Directional suffixes are not limited to motion verbs. When added to non-motion verbs, their meanings are a figurative one. The following table gives some examples of directional suffixes and their possible meanings.